For most of my life, I was very good at pushing through. And for a very long time, I thought that was one of my strengths. Hello, beautiful human. This video's going to be a little bit different. I don't know if you followed me on other social media platforms or not. Anyways, it's longer than the videos I normally make, and it's more personal because I want to tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am today. Because when you see me talking about burnout, resilience, mental health, and learning how to live differently, there's a reason these subjects matter so much to me. I didn't learn about them from a textbook. I learned about a lot of them the hard way. I've worked for most of my adult life and my teenage years. I worked in security. I worked in information technology. I've worked in very demanding environments and jobs with significant responsibility. And somewhere along the way, I became someone who could handle a lot. If something needed doing, I did it. If there was a problem, I tried to solve it. If work became stressful, I just pushed harder. If I was exhausted, I kept on going. And when you're that kind of a worker, people tend to appreciate it. You're dependable, you're hardworking, you're the person who gets things done. Those are awesome qualities. But I've learned that they can have another side. Because when you're always the person who can handle more, eventually people are going to start expecting more than you can handle. And eventually you're going to start expecting it from yourself. The question stops being, is this too much? And it becomes, how do I find a way to keep doing it? I became very good at answering that second question. I wasn't nearly as good at asking the first. My difficulties didn't begin with my career. When I was about 13 years old, I was sexually abused by a teacher and vice principal. That experience affected me profoundly, although it took me many years to understand just how profoundly. I've spent more than 35 years working on my mental health. I've dealt with depression, anxiety, trauma, PTSD. I've had therapy. I've struggled. I've recovered. I've fallen down again. And I've gotten back up. And through most of it, I worked. That's an important part of my story because I think I sometimes used to be my ability to continue functioning is evidence that I was okay. I could still get up. I could still go to work. I could still solve problems. So I could still take care of my responsibilities. So I must be okay. But I learned doing something since then, being able to function and actually being well are not the same thing. Eventually, I found myself struggling again, and by that point, I was trying to help myself, but I wasn't necessarily doing it very well. I made a lot of mistakes, and I am acknowledging that. One of the things I learned through years of working on my mental health is that taking responsibility for yourself matters. But there's another lesson that I've learned. Taking responsibility of your own choices doesn't mean accepting responsibility for everything that happened around you. By the end of my working life, I was completely burned out. I was struggling, and the workplace itself had been part of what brought me there. Eventually, I was fired. And that's not how I imagined ending my work life. After decades of working, contributing, solving problems, and trying to be someone to people who they could depend on, I didn't walk happily out the door into retirement. Sorry, it's hard to talk about. My career ended painfully, and it carried that pain with me. So when I tell people that I'm retired today, there's a temptation to make it sound like a happy ending. I'm sorry, but it wasn't. Retirement didn't magically undo burnout, and it didn't erase decades of habits, and it certainly didn't immediately teach me how to live differently. Because when you've spent most of your life pushing through things, you don't suddenly stop doing that because there's nowhere for you to have to be on Monday morning. I had spent decades learning how to endure. Now I had to start learning how to live life as a person. And those are surprisingly different skills. So I started asking questions that I probably should have asked years earlier. What does my body need? What does my mind need? When am I actually tired? When have I had enough? Why do I feel guilty when I'm not accomplishing something? Why did I become so comfortable ignoring my own limits? And perhaps the biggest question was, what would it look like to build a life that I don't constantly need to recover from? I don't have all those answers yet. I'm still figuring this out. I'm still learning how to rest, and I'm still learning how to listen to myself. I'm still learning that my value isn't determined by how productive I am. And I'm learning that resilience doesn't always mean pushing through. Sometimes resilience means changing directions. So that's part of why I created Resilient Paths. I'm not a psychologist, and I am definitely not here to diagnose anybody. And I am certainly not going to pretend that because I've lived through something that I have all the answers, when what I do have is lived experience. And looking backward, I can see things that now I couldn't see while I was living through them. I can now see the warning signs I ignored. I can now see times when I should have rested. I can see times when I accepted things as normal that probably shouldn't have been normal. And I can see how easily a capable person can become an exhausted person without anyone, including themselves, really noticing what's going on. Maybe that's why you're watching this. Maybe you are the dependable one. Maybe you're the person everybody counts on. And maybe you just keep showing up all the time. You keep doing your job well. You keep taking care of your family. And you keep solving problems. And because you're still functioning, everyone assumes you're doing okay. Maybe you're assuming that too. I'm not going to tell you to quit your job. I'm not going to tell you that every difficult workplace is responsible for someone's mental health. Life is much more complicated than that, I'm afraid. But I will tell you something I wish I had understood earlier. If staying functional requires you to continually sacrifice your health, your peace, your relationships, or yourself, it's worth asking whether you're doing this is actually sustainable. And don't always ask, what is wrong with me? Sometimes it's also worth asking, what is happening around me? What does this mean? You don't have to wait until everyone falls apart before you're allowed to take that question seriously. I spent much of my life proving how much I could endure. These days, I'm trying to learn something different. I'm trying to build a life worth experiencing rather than one that I could just simply survive. And that's where I am now. And that's what really Resilient Paths is all about.